Madam President, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about, as we talk today about passing new laws, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about enforcing the laws that the Congress has already passed. I want to talk today about something that I believe have been pushed to the wayside too many times by the current administration, and Madam President, that would be the Constitution of the United States. Article 2, Section 3 of the United States Constitution declares that the President, coming right out of the Constitution, says the President, quote, shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Simply put, constitutional requirements are just that. They're constitutional requirements. They're not constitutional suggestions. This is not something that the Constitution doesn't clearly define. The branches of government in the Constitution are the judicial, the legislative, and the executive, and the job of the executive is, again, to do what? To take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Yet time and again, President Obama has refused to enforce the law and shown a willingness, frankly, to misuse regulations, in my view, to sidestep the Congress, to sidestep what the law intended to do, and more importantly, to step around the Constitution. Whether it's using waivers to states for the work requirements contained in the Bipartisan Welfare Reform Act of 1996, or announcing yet another change, and we're now over 24 changes and delays in the President's own health care law, the current administration has sought ways over and over again to circumvent the Congress by picking and choosing which laws it wants to enforce. Clearly not a power given the President in the Constitution. In fact, there's a reason that the legislative branch is Article 1 of the Constitution, because the founders clearly saw the legislative branch as the branch that would determine the direction of the country, and the president's job was not to write the law. The president's job was to execute the law, to enforce the law. You know, people all over America are rightly concerned about government overreach. They're rightly concerned about government dysfunction. They're rightly concerned about a Senate that hasn't brought the appropriations bills to the floor the way they should come to the floor for over 7 years now, so we're not debating our priorities, but it's the overreach, the dysfunction, the lack of compliance with the law, and the seeming belief that somehow that's the president's job to decide which laws we comply with as a country and which ones we don't, which laws the government enforces and which ones it doesn't enforce. That's not the president's job. I introduced a bill this week to stop this overreach and to force President Obama to uphold the Constitution. The Enforce the Law Act, which is co-sponsored by more than half of my Republican Senate colleagues and which passed the House yesterday, permits Congress to authorize a lawsuit against the president if he fails to uphold the constitutional obligation to uphold the law. Now, whenever we're asked, all of us as members of the Senate, by people that we work for, how can the president just decide he's not going to enforce the law? One of the reasons we've all truthfully given to the other question is, what are you going to do about it, is that at this point, there's no standing of individual members of Congress or even the entire body of the Senate or the body of the House to go to court and say, we have standing in court to have this law enforced. This bill would become law, and a law that would give the Congress that standing. It effectively permits the Congress, either house of the Congress, to authorize a lawsuit against the president if he fails to uphold his constitutional obligation to faithfully execute the law. Now, if the president has a defense, this is a lawsuit. His side can go to court and defend that. But if he doesn't have a defense, he has sworn, as we have, to uphold the Constitution. This isn't a partisan matter. This bill's important because it gives Congress the ability to combat executive disregard for the Congress, no matter what party controls the White House or no matter what party controls the Congress. The courts have ruled that individual members of Congress lack standing to take the administration to court. So we're not considered individually a so-called aggrieved party, and that's why members, whether it was the National Labor Relations Board case where the president thought he could decide whether the Senate was in session or not, instead of the Senate deciding whether the Senate was in session, I joined many of my colleagues to file an amicus brief. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm able to do that as a citizen, to file an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, saying why we thought the president was wrong and why we thought the people who were challenging the rules that this group created that were put in power in an unconstitutional way. We could file that, but we couldn't initiate that. We couldn't go to court and say, we believe that the law is not being enforced. The Enforce Act removes that procedural barrier so that a suit brought by a member of the House, a member of the Senate, can be empowered to bring a lawsuit in federal court challenging the administration's refusal to enforce the law, challenging the administration's belief that on their own they can suspend the law, they can postpone the law, they can delay the law. Now, if the law gives the president the ability to do that, it's going to be in the clear black and white letters of the law. It's not there now. The Enforce Act provides an expedited process so that if this lawsuit is initiated this way by one or both houses of the Congress against the administration for not faithfully executing the law, it goes immediately to a 3-judge panel in the U.S. District Court and then goes directly to the Supreme Court if there's an appeal. This is an easy way to solve this problem. It's a way that creates standing to define who is constitutionally obligated to do a job that they are not doing. It's time we reestablish the proper limits on the executive branch. The founders believed in separation of powers. It's the responsibility of the Congress to protect the idea they came up with in a document for the first time that was a governing document, the idea of checks and balances. If you eliminate that idea of checks and balances, you eliminate the miracle of the Constitution. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me and others in supporting this effort to stop executive overreach and encourage the president to enforce the law. The Constitution still matters. The Constitution deserves to be defended. This is a way that the members of the Congress of the United States can give themselves the ability to launch that defense. And again, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill that the House passed just yesterday. All we have to do our part is step forward and pass this legislation now.